Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some injury updates, a waiver update from our past couple of days, plus we got some trade rumors involving the Red Wings, the Bruins, the Penguins, and the Predators. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End to End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. It really does help with the channel, and we're on the road to 500 subscribers. And don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all that was discussed here today. So in today's video, it's another news and rumor video. So as per usual, we've got more signings to talk about. 11 signings that we saw from over the past week. There were a couple of them, some interesting ones, a couple with multiple teams, and most of these were ELCs. So we'll talk about all of these ones here. So first, we saw the Colorado Avalanche sign 2 players to 2-year ELCs. First, they signed Isaac Posh, who is an undrafted goalie prospect, to a 2-year ELC with AAV of $873,000. Now, Posh has been playing over in the NCAA this past year, had 22 games of NCAA action, putting up a 2.4 GAA and 923 save percentage, which was one of his better seasons. So Posh looked pretty good for the Avalanche. I think eventually he might be able to work his way into a backup role for Colorado. So interesting note there. But the Avalanche has an undrafted prospect Posh to new ELC. And then we also saw the Avalanche sign another guy, that's right-wing undrafted prospect Cooper Gay, to a 2-year ELC, also with an AAV of $873,000. Now Gay, just like Posh, had also been playing over the NCAA, had 19 goals this year and a career-high 30 points in 35 games, nearly a point per game over the NCAA. So looks really good. I think eventually could be maybe a solid bomb 6-4 there for the Avalanche. So interesting signings there, but the Avalanche have signed right-wing undrafted prospect Gay and fully undrafted prospect Posh to 2-year ELCs. Then we saw Philadelphia Flyers sign 2 players. The first one was actually one of the draft picks, as they signed 2021 5th round pick, 158th overall, left shot D prospect Ty Murchison to a 2-year ELC with an AAV of $860,000. Now Murchison had also been playing over the NCAA this past year, had a little bit of a down year after having 7 points 2 years ago. This past year had 4 assists and 4 points in 37 games, so it wasn't overly very productive season, but he is a more of a defensive-minded defenseman, it seems like, from his time over in college. I think eventually could work his way into like a third pair role for the Flyers, so that's an interesting ELC signing from our past couple of days. And the other ELC prospect signing that the Flyers made was another undrafted guy, as the Flyers have signed undrafted center prospect Carson Dorwart to a 2-year ELC with AV of $975,000. Obviously Dorwart, it seems like one of the better prospects that's been signed recently over from the NCAA. This past year had 13 goals and 31 points in 35 games after he had 34 points the year prior, so looked pretty good. Has also already gone into 1 game of NHL action for Philadelphia Flyers, so that's really good stuff there. I think Dorwart eventually could be a solid middle 6 guy in the Flyers organization, so interesting note there. But Dorwart and Murchison have both signed ELCs in the Flyers organization. Then we saw Columbus Blue Jackets sign 2 players to ELCs. The first one was actually a 2024 draft pick, the 36th overall second rounder of this past year's draft, right shot D prospect Charlie Elick, who I at one point did have going late first round in my mock drafts, did wind up going in the second round to Columbus. He gets a 3-year ELC with the AAV of $907,000. So that's a pretty good deal for the Jackets. He's been playing over in the WHL this past year, split time between 2 teams, had 2 goals and 15 points in 66 games with those 2 teams combined. He had 27 points last year, so a little bit of a step back from the year prior that he had, but still a decent season from Elick. I think eventually he will be a solid second pair defenseman there for the Blue Jackets, so good to see that he gets his ELC. Probably won't see any NHL action for the next couple of years, but that's an interesting ELC sign there from the Jackets. And they also signed undrafted left shot defensive prospect Caleb McDonald to a 2-year ELC with an AAV of $923,000. McDonald, like most of these other players, have been playing over the NCAA. This past year had 3 goals and 10 points in 35 NCAA games, so he looked pretty good. I think eventually McDonald might be able to work himself out as like a third pair defenseman for the Jackets. So interesting note there, but the Jackets have signed Elick and McDonald to new ELCs. Then we also saw a couple of other ELCs that were given out from our past couple of days. First, we saw the LA Kings give a 3-year ELC with an AAV of $875,000 to 2024 6th round pick Jared Woolley, who's a left shot defenseman prospect. Now Woolley was one of the later round picks in this past year's draft. He's been playing over in the OHL last year, had 3 goals and 5 points in 37 27 games, but this year has basically surpassed to another level compared to last year, putting up a 9-goal, 28-point season in 68 OHL games for the London Knights. Woolley looks like a very fantastic left shot defenseman. I think eventually on that Kings blue line could be a solid third pair guy. So interesting note there, just like Elick, probably won't get into any NHL action soon, but still, that's an interesting sign there from the Kings. Then we saw the Vegas Golden Knights and one of their draft picks from our past couple of years. They sent 2022 4th round pick Cameron Whitehead, who's a goaltender, to a 2-year ELC with an AAV of $875,000. Now for Whitehead, he had also been playing over the NCAA, had a 2.74 GAA and 911 save percentage in 35 games this year. A tiny bit worse numbers than last year, but not by much over the NCAA. So I think Whitehead, sort of like Posh in Colorado, might eventually work out to be a backup for Vegas. So interesting note there, but that's an interesting sign there for the Vegas Golden Knights. There were 2 other ELCs that we saw, and these ones were some of the bigger ones. As the Buffalo Sabres assigned goaltending prospect, who was picked in the 2022 draft, 2nd round, 41st overall, Topias Leinonen, to a 3-year ELC with an AV of $886,000. Now Leinonen has been playing over in Hockey Allsvenskan. This past year, he played 25 Hockey Allsvenskan games, putting up a 2.31 GAA and a 910 save percentage, which is absolutely fantastic. So I think Leinonen, depending on what happens with Buffalo and Levi and Luukkonen in maybe 2 to 3 years time, could wind up challenging for like a backup role in Buffalo. So an interesting ELC sign there, but that's a really solid ad for the Sabres to get another goaltender on their contract for the next little while. And then we saw St. Louis Blues sign the cream of this signing crop, and that is 2022 first round pick, 23rd overall, Jimmy Snuggerud. Snuggerud, who's a right wing prospect, gets a 3-year ELC with an AV of $950,000. That starts for this year and works for the next couple of seasons. Now Snuggerud had also been playing over in the NCAA. This past year had 24 goals and a career high 51 points in 40 NCAA games. He had looked phenomenal. There was a reason he was a first round pick a couple of years back. He's even gone since the signing of this deal into 3 NHL games, with the St. Louis Blues having 2 assists. So he's still awaiting his first career NHL goal, but he has a couple of assists. He's been a very fantastic add to that top 9 on that Blues team that's clicking on all cylinders right now. So that's another interesting ELC, and Snuggerud will be a solid top 9 forward for years to come for that St. Louis Blues team. And then we saw one standard contract. It was a contract extension as Dylan McIlrath on the blue line for the Washington Capitals, right shot defenseman, call-up option guy who was in the final year of his deal, got a 2-year contract extension with the AAV of $800,000 to remain with the Washington Capitals. Now so far this year, McIlrath has been in the Capital system over the past couple of years, has been called up, gone into 13 NHL games for the Capitals, putting up 2 assists and 2 points, also had 21 penalty minutes. This is the most games action he got at an NHL level season since the 2019-20 season with the Red Wings. So it's been a really good season for McIlrath. He's shown he can be a solid 7-8 defenseman, get into the third pair if need be. So that's an interesting signing. It's a very low risk signing there for the Capitals. So I'm pretty happy with that sort of a deal. So lots of interesting signings. We saw the Avalanche, Flyers, Jackets all signed 2 players to ELCs. We saw a couple of really big guys like Leinonen and Buffalo and Snuggerud and St. Louis also sign ELCs. And then we saw McIlrath get his new contract extension. So some interesting updates there from our past couple of days when it comes to signings. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. When it comes to the injury updates, we got a couple of things to talk about from our past couple of days. First, Brady Tkachuk missed Tuesday's game action with upper body injury in his day-to-day. So it's a bad blow there for the Senators to lose their captain yet again. Now, Senators are in a relatively good position. They have not clinched a playoff spot by any means, but they are in a decent position, so they can afford to rest Tkachuk a couple of games if it means he's a little bit healthier come playoff time, if the Sens do end up making it. So interesting note there, but Tkachuk has missed a couple of games now for the Ottawa Senators, while Nick Cousins has started to skate and may be able to return in the very end of the regular season or the very start of the playoffs for Senators. Cousins did help Florida as a bottom 6 forward last year win the Stanley Cup, so adding him back to that bottom 6 would be a solid addition there for Ottawa, so we'll have to keep our eye on Cousins. When it comes to the Vancouver Canucks, they got updates on all their guys. Elias Pettersson has only skated 1 to 2 times since his injury and may not return before the end of the regular season, which means this season might be over. It's not guaranteed by any means, but it does sound like it's trending more towards that sort of result. When it comes to Filip Chytil. He probably also won't return this season due to his concussion problems. Hopefully he'll be able to be ready for training camp next year and be able to be a solid second line center there for a Canucks, but it doesn't sound like he'll be back. Well, Nils Hoglander, who is still out with an undisclosed injury, is doing well and could return in the very near future, potentially next week or the week after. So interesting note there, as those are some interesting updates when it comes to Canucks. For Nashville, Colton Sissons, who has missed a few games now with a leg injury, which we mentioned a couple of videos ago, probably will not return this year, so it sounds like Colton Sissons' season is done for Nashville. With Nashville only having a handful of games left, that makes sense. So interesting note there. Luke Shen, Winnipeg, missed Tuesday's game due to an injury, and Zay Day sets a bad blow there for the Jets on their blue line. Hopefully they can weather the storm and keep winning a couple of games to stay ahead of Dallas without one of their top defensemen. Utah's Olli Maatta has his second straight game with a lower body injury on Tuesday and remains day-to-day, so hopefully Maatta gets back in the very near future. He's actually been a really good piece for Utah, so hopefully he won't be out for much longer. Colorado's Joel Kiviranta, who has missed 3 games with a lower body injury, should return in the very near future, so that could be a really big boost there for Colorado. Dante Fabbro returned to game action on Tuesday after missing 1 game with an undisclosed injury, so that's very fantastic news for the Jackets blue line to get a solid defender back. Carolina's Jordan Staal missed Wednesday's game due to a lower body injury in his day-to-day, so hopefully it won't be a longer-term injury, but bad to see that the Hurricanes have lost their captain. Buffalo's Josh Norris and Jordan Greenway both missed Tuesday's game due to their respective injuries and remain out day-to-day. These two have dealt with injuries all season long, so hopefully they won't be out for any stretch of time and they'll be back in the very near future. New Jersey's Dougie Hamilton, who has been out since March 4th with lower body injury, is progressing better than expected and might be able to be back potentially towards the end of the regular season, if not then early in the playoffs, which would be a big and massive boost to the Devils blue line. So that's very fantastic news, and hopefully Hamilton will get back at some point in the playoffs. Florida's Alex Barkov missed Wednesday's game with upper body injury and is out day-to-day, while Nico Sturm left Tuesday's game with upper body injury and is also out day-to-day. So a solid top 6 center and a solid bottom 6 center are both out right now for Florida, so that's a bad blow there for the Panthers. Tomas Chytil returned to practice for Vegas and may return at some point over the next week or two, so that could be a really big boost there for Vegas to get Chytil back from injury after he was injured. And Washington's Logan Thompson left Wednesday's game with an upper body injury and didn't return. He might miss a couple of games too for the Capitals, and that would be a really bad blow for Washington. So interesting note there. Good to see guys like Hamilton, Fabbro, Hoglander, and Cousins all either get back into game action or seem like they're nearing a return, and hopefully it won't take too long to return to game action. But bad news to see guys like Tkachuk, Chytil, Sissons, and Norris all be out with injuries, and hopefully they won't be out for an overly long period of time, but some interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a quick waiver update. In our last video, we mentioned that Emil Bemstrom was on waivers by Pittsburgh Penguins. We said that at this point in time, players who are claimed off of waivers cannot play for their teams at the end of the regular season or in the playoffs, so it makes no sense for teams to claim players off of waivers right now. So it comes as no surprise that Emil Bemstrom did wind up clearing a couple of days ago, so he'll be able to be reassigned to the minors or stay up with the Penguins, but he has cleared waivers. So once again, with where we are in the season right now, not too surprising that happened. So interesting waiver update, but Bemstrom and Pittsburgh did indeed clear waivers. So those are all the waiver updates from the past couple of days. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So when it comes to trade rumors, we definitely have a couple of things to talk about here today. We have 4 things. We're going to start off with the Detroit Red Wings. There have been a couple of recent reports. I think I've seen a couple of Athletic articles and also a couple of other articles talking about it, saying that the Detroit Red Wings might be one of the more busier teams this offseason. Now, the Red Wings, they're not mathematically out of a playoff spot, but it's starting to look less and less likely that they're going to get in. Another season with missed playoffs would not go over very well in Detroit. So it definitely seems like Steve Yzerman is going to have to make a lot of moves. Like, there were a lot of questionable moves he made last offseason, like keeping Justin Hull, keeping Ben Sherratt, maybe not trying to trade or buy them out, moving Jake Wellman for a second-round pick, which wound up turning out to be a disastrous move. It sounded like they were going to try and go for a big upgrade, but they never wound up being able to do so. Like, there was a lot of talk about getting Jacob Trouba. That never happened. There was a lot of talk about them trying to maybe add someone on the free agent market on the forward group. That never happened. So there was a lot of missed opportunities there for Detroit to improve this team, and it seems to be biting them in the butt. So it sounds like they could wind up being a very busy team this upcoming offseason. I think personally, if you look at this roster, I think this team needs a starting level goaltender. I don't have full confidence that Mrazek and Talbot can be a good enough tandem to get this team to the playoffs. So I think they need to go out and get a goaltender, whether it's a guy like John Gibson or Thatcher Demko, or maybe one of the lower end guys in UFA status. They need to go out and get someone who can play starting level minutes. They need some work on that blue line. Like, Sider's still a really good defenseman. Evanson's starting to come into his own, but they still have a lot of holes in that blue line. Like, I would consider a Hull buyout. I would consider a Ben Sherratt buyout. I would consider a couple of other things to try and tinker with that blue line. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But blue line upgrade, like, trying to acquire like a solid top four defenseman, I think has to be one of the Red Wings' priorities. When you go over to the forward group, like the forward group's not overly bad, and they have a lot of really good pieces, but like Kane's on the pending UFA, will he come back? That's a big question. I think they need to consider moving a guy like Andrew Copp, who's done all right, but hasn't been the best of fits from free agency. I think you gotta consider moving him out. So I think the Red Wings have a lot to tinker with and a lot of potential options, whether they're via trade or via free agency. I don't know exactly what they'll try and go through, but there's a very likely chance that we could see many moves, maybe moving off of a Hull or a Sherratt, or trying to move off of a Kopp, maybe trying to add a starting level goaltender like a Gibson or a Demko, maybe trying to add a defenseman like if Erik Karlsson's available, do they go after him? Do they try and go after a guy like Keandre Miller? Do they go in free agency? Maybe a guy like Ivan Provorov. Maybe that's another option they could go. Maybe they go after some top six forwards. Do they try and keep Kane? Like there's a lot of questions for the Red Wings team, and if they do miss the playoffs again, you better believe big changes are coming in Detroit. So we're gonna have to keep an eye on that. We're gonna go over to the Pittsburgh Penguins. I've seen a couple of other people recently talking about Tristan Jarry. After coming up after his AHL stint, after being placed on waivers, Jarry has looked a whole bunch better for Pittsburgh. He's gotten them a couple of wins. He's looked a lot better and a lot more like the guy who's supposed to be solid, and a lot more like the guy who Kyle Dubas was signed to that 5-year contract extension. Now, I don't think that by any means that the Penguins are holding on to him, but it might increase a little bit more trade value in him. So teams who probably weren't very interested in Jarry, maybe they would be open to acquiring him. So I don't know exactly what they could do, but Pittsburgh definitely needs some more goaltending help. I mean, we've seen that this year. This Penguins team's not overly great defensively, and goaltending had a lot to do with it. Jarry's inconsistency and Nedeljkovic not doing overly great. They do still have a guy like Joel Blomqvist in the minors. They could try and go after maybe like a short-term upgrade in the free agent market. So we will have to wait and see. But with Jarry's recent play, that has led a lot of people to speculate if Jarry could be dealt in the offseason. And like I said, I think it would have to be sort of like a money in, money out type deal. And it would have to be for a team who would be open to having Jarry as like a tandem goaltender. Because I think at this point in time, Jarry just isn't consistent enough to be a starter. So if there's a team out there who could use like a 1B goaltender who could take a little bit off the starter, I think that's a possibility. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But keep your interest in Jarry, as after his good play over the past couple of weeks, there's a very likely chance we could see a Jarry trade in the offseason. Next, going over to the Boston Bruins. Now, I was looking at the Boston Bruins recently, looking at their lineup, and this team's going to have some major changes in the offseason. We've already seen a whole bunch of changes in the trade deadline, with them moving off of Brandon Carlo and Brad Marchand and Charlie Coyle and a couple of other guys. Like, they made a lot of changes to the trade deadline, and you got to think that changes are going to be coming in the offseason. Like, I don't think they're going to touch any of their core pieces. Like, Jeremy Swayman, I think, is fine there. I think Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm will still be there. I think David Pastrnak will still be there, but I do think there's a possibility we could see some guys on maybe not longer term deals, but maybe still sign for a couple of years, wind up getting moved. If you look at this team, like I said, I think Swayman, Korpisalo will probably wind up being the same goaltending tandem next year. If you look at their blue line, they have a lot of pending UFA or pending RFA deals like a Lorai or a couple of other guys. Another guy who I think could wind up being moved is Andrew Peeke. He'll be entering the final year of his deal. He's a UFA at the end of the contract. He's making $2.75 million, and it's shown he can be a decent third pair defenseman. So if they could get a decent enough return, I wouldn't be surprised if Peeke was gone. Another guy is Nikita Zadorov. He has not worked out overly well in Boston. I think they overpaid him in free agency, and I don't think he's worth the $5 million. I don't think he's a second pair defenseman at this point in time. So I do think they might consider moving him if it makes sense for the Boston Bruins. I don't think they'll move him off just to be a cap dump, but if they can get out of the Nikita Zadorov contract in some creative way, I think there's a really possibility to try and do that. Up front, you got Pavel Zacha, who's got 2 years left after this year at 4.75. I would not be one bit surprised if the returns were good enough that they consider moving Zacha. Like, he's been a really solid addition there for the Boston Bruins, but if the Bruins are going to start being a bond-dwelling team, I'm not sure if Zacha really wants to be there. And being in Boston, if they do wind up going on like a tanking type thing, wouldn't be the best for Zacha. So I think there's a really good chance if they do wind up going in the retool, rebuild type direction, that we could see a Zacha trade. Part of me also thinks of Elias Lindholm, just like Zadorov. I think they way overpaid for Lindholm. If they could find a creative way to get out of the Lindholm contract, I think that's a possibility. Morgan Geekie, who's an RFA, having a career season, wouldn't be surprised if they consider moving him, depending on what Geekie's offer is. Like, if they feel that he could be a solution there for Boston, I think they could wind up keeping him. But if they could get a really good return for Geekie, I think there's a really good chance we could see him traded. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But after an atrocious season, one of the worst we've seen in recent memory for Boston. It does seem like changes will be coming in the offseason, and they could have a whole bunch of different faces next year, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to Nashville Predators. Could the Predators move last year's premium free agent chip and Steven Stamkos this upcoming offseason? Now, I've seen this be mentioned a couple of times, most notably on Frank Saravalli's Daily Faceoff show. He was talking to former NHL goalie Carter Hutton, sort of talking about what's the big move that the Predators could make this offseason to move off one of their veterans, and they sort of agreed that Stamkos made the most sense. Like, they're not moving Forsberg, he's still been a very fantastic player. Yossi's value to that team is still showing, so I don't think they move him. They're locked into Saros now. They aren't moving Saros at this point, and between Marshall and Stamkos, who were the two big signings this past year, they do think that Marshall, with him producing a little bit more points than Stamkos this year, being a little bit cheaper, and also being on a longer term contract, might be a little bit easier and more palatable to keep. But they do think there's a possibility that if the Predators were to move one of those big long-term contracts, that Stamkos makes the most sense. He's got next year plus 2 more seasons left on his deal at $8 million. Now, it's not like he's had a bad season. I think he's already hit the 20 goal mark this year, but he's nowhere close to the 40 goal season he had in Tampa last year. So once again, Stamkos has a full no movement clause, just like a couple of the other guys we talked about over the past little while. He'll call his shots. If he wants to stay in Nashville, he'll stay in Nashville and be the solution there. But if he's open to the move, I wouldn't be overly shocked if we did see a Stamkos move. And I don't know where he'd go. I don't know which teams will have the cap space where Stamkos would want to go to sort of add a guy like Stamkos. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But if the Predators were to move one of their big long-term contracts this offseason, look for it to be Steven Stamkos. So that's all I'm talking for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What was your opinion on all of this? Do you think the Predators will move Stamkos in the offseason? And if so, where does he go? Do you think that the Boston Bruins will blow it up even more in the offseason? If so, which players do you think wind up leaving? In Detroit, what sort of moves do you think they'll try and do in the offseason to improve this team? And in Pittsburgh, do you think Tristan Jarry gets moved? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Plus the injury update, waiver update, and signing update from our past couple days. Definitely that's all I want to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you're listening, to subscribe below. Really does help with the channel, and we're on the road to 500 subscribers. And don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. Also a blog talking about news, rumors, and analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll leave a link to that down in the description below. And I cannot wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.